They thought I was just another broke girl with no future. Right there at my graduation party, when my stepfather humiliated me in front of everyone, calling me a parasite who'd never amount to anything. What they didn't know was that I had over $62 million sitting in my accounts and a ruthless plan to make them pay for every single look of contempt they'd ever given me. My name is Rachel Monroe, and at 28, I had just walked across that stage to receive my MBA from Cleveland State University. The diploma felt heavy in my hands not because of the weight, but because of what it represented. 2 years of grinding through night classes while building my tech startup in secret. 2 years of pretending I was just another struggling student living off my mother's charity. The graduation party was Gregory Sanders' idea. Of course. My stepfather never missed an opportunity to play the generous patriarch, especially when it gave him a stage to perform on. Their suburban McMansion was packed with relatives, neighbors, and his business associates, all the people whose opinions mattered to him. The dining room table groaned under catered food that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and Gregory made sure everyone knew it. "Huh, look at this spread," he announced, his voice booming over the classical music he'd insisted on. "Nothing but the best for our little graduate." Our little graduate. The words dripped with condescension, the same tone he'd used to praise a child for finger painting. I stood near the kitchen island, nursing a glass of wine and watching him work the room. Gregory was in his element navy blazer, perfectly pressed khakis, that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. At 55, he'd perfected the art of looking successful. Real estate development had been good to him, or at least that's what he wanted everyone to believe. "Rachel, sweetheart, come here," he called out, waving me over with that same patronizing gesture I'd endured for 15 years. "I want to tell everyone about your accomplishment." The way he said accomplishment made it sound like I'd learned to tie my shoes. I walked over, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The crowd turned to look at me, aunts and uncles who barely knew me, Gregory's golf buddies with their fake tans and Rolex watches, neighbors who'd watched me grow up but never really saw me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gregory began, his arm sliding around my shoulders like a snake, "our Rachel has finally finished school. 28 years old, and she's got herself a fancy piece of paper." A few people chuckled. My mother, Elaine, stood by the fireplace, her smile tight and nervous. She knew what was coming. We all did. "Of course," Gregory continued, his grip tightening on my shoulder. "We're all wondering what comes next. I mean, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Living at home, depending on her mother's support all these years." The room grew quieter. This was the part where Gregory liked to dig the knife in deeper. "Not everyone can be a self-made success," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Some people need a little more guidance, a little more time to figure things out. And that's okay. That's what family is for, right? Taking care of those who can't quite take care of themselves." The words hit like slaps, each sentence carefully crafted to sound supportive while delivering maximum humiliation. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, felt the eyes of every person in that room weighing me, measuring me, finding me lacking. "I'm sure Rachel will find her way eventually," Gregory went on, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe she'll find a nice man to take care of her. God knows she's pretty enough." Someone laughed, one of his golf buddies. Probably. The sound echoed in my ears like breaking glass. I looked around the room at their faces, some pitying, some amused, some uncomfortable but too polite to say anything. My own family, watching as Gregory stripped away whatever dignity I had left, and doing nothing to stop it. My mother's eyes found mine across the room. For just a moment, I saw something that might have been an apology, but she didn't speak up. She never did. "Well," I said finally, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. "Thank you for the lovely party, Gregory, and thank you all for coming to celebrate with me." I raised my wine glass in a mock toast, my smile as practiced as his. "Here's to family." The crowd raised their glasses. missing the edge in my voice entirely. They saw what they expected to see, a young woman graciously accepting her place in the hierarchy, grateful for the scraps of respect thrown her way. But as I stood there, surrounded by their false smiles and hollow congratulations, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw a broke graduate student, a burden, a pretty face with no prospects. They had no idea that the woman they were pitying had $62 million in various accounts. They had no idea that the startup I'd built in secret had been acquired by a Fortune 500 company for a sum that would make Gregory's little real estate empire look like a child's lemonade stand. And as Gregory's laughter filled the room, as my mother looked away, as the crowd began to disperse into smaller conversations, I made myself a promise. They would know. Soon enough, they would all know exactly who Rachel Monroe really was. And by then, it would be far too late for apologies. The party finally ended around 11:30 that night. I watched from the living room window as the last guests pulled out of the driveway, their taillights disappearing into the darkness like dying embers. The house felt different now, hollow, somehow. The silence was deafening after hours of forced laughter and empty conversations. I slipped out through the sliding glass door onto the back deck, my wine glass in hand. The night air was cool against my skin, a relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside. Behind me, I could hear Gregory and my mother cleaning up, their voices a low murmur punctuated by the clink of dishes. The deck overlooked their perfectly manicured backyard, Gregory's pride and joy. Every blade of grass measured, every flower bed geometrically precise. It was beautiful in the way a magazine spread was beautiful, flawless, and completely lifeless. I settled into one of the patio chairs and let my mind drift back. 15 years. That's how long Gregory Sanders had been poisoning my life with his particular brand of calculated cruelty. I was 13 when he first walked into our modest little house on Maple Street. Mom had been struggling as a single parent since my father died when I was 8. She worked double shifts at the hospital, came home exhausted, and tried to hold everything together with sheer willpower and determination. When Gregory appeared successful, charming, offering stability, she thought she'd won the lottery. I knew better from the start. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just little comments, tiny corrections that chipped away at my confidence one splinter at a time. "Are you sure you want to wear that to school? Rachel. You look a little heavy in it." Or, "Maybe you should spend less time reading and more time learning how to cook. Men don't like women who think they're smarter than everyone else." My mother would give him those tight smiles and gently suggest he was being too harsh. But she never stood up to him. Not really. By the time we moved into his house, this house the patterns were set. Gregory was the king of his castle. Mom was his grateful queen, and I was the unwanted reminder of her life before him. High school was a special kind of hell. While other kids worried about prom dates and college applications, I watched Gregory systematically undermine every achievement I earned. Made the honor roll, don't let it go to your head, sweetheart. Grades don't mean much in the real world. Got accepted to Ohio State with a partial scholarship. Community college would be more practical. No point in getting ideas above your station. But the worst part wasn't his words. It was my mother's silence. Every time he diminished me, she would look away, change the subject, find urgent tasks that required her immediate attention. She had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. I took another sip of wine and felt that familiar burn of old anger mixing with something newer, sharper. Tonight had been different. Tonight, Gregory had humiliated me in front of dozens of people, and my mother had stood there like a statue, watching it happen. The irony was almost beautiful in its completeness. While Gregory was busy treating me like a financial burden, I had been quietly building an empire he couldn't even comprehend. The tech startup Data Flow Solutions had started in my dorm room junior year of college. A simple idea about streamlining data analytics for small businesses that grew into something extraordinary. I'd kept it secret from everyone, worked on it in the library, in coffee shops, anywhere but home. When investors started calling, when the acquisition offers began pouring in, I handled everything through lawyers and shell companies. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew exactly what would happen if Gregory found out. He would have found a way to claim credit, would have positioned himself as the mastermind behind my success, the wise stepfather who guided me to greatness. The thought made my stomach turn. The sale had closed 3 months ago, $62.7 million after taxes and legal fees, money that existed in accounts Gregory had never heard of, protected by legal structures he couldn't penetrate even if he knew they existed. While he was in there gloating about his little performance tonight, patting himself on the back for keeping the family gold digger in line, I was sitting on enough money to buy and sell his entire world 10 times over. The sliding door opened behind me, and I heard footsteps crossing the deck. Mom appeared in my peripheral vision, her face pale and drawn in the porch light. "Rachel, honey," she said softly, settling into the chair beside me. "I'm sorry about tonight. Gregory gets a little carried away sometimes when he's had a few drinks." I didn't look at her, couldn't trust myself to keep the contempt out of my eyes. "He means well," she continued, her voice getting smaller. "He just wants you to be independent, to stand on your own 2 feet. "Is that what you call it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sweetheart, I know it's hard, but Gregory has been good to us. This house, your education, everything we have—" "Everything you have," I corrected, finally turning to meet her eyes. "I never asked for any of it." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Rachel, please. He's family now. We have to make this work." Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. This was what she called family, a man who spent 15 years systematically destroying her daughter's self-worth while she stood by and watched. "Mom," I said, setting my wine glass down on the table between us. "When I was 16 and Gregory told me I was too stupid for AP classes, where were you?" "Rachel." "Well, when I graduated valedictorian and he said it was because the school had low standards, where were you?" "Please don't." "When I got into graduate school and he called it a waste of time and money, where were you?" She was crying now, silent tears that caught the light from the house, but I felt nothing, no sympathy, no regret, just a cold, crystalline clarity that cut through 15 years of accumulated hurt. "You were right there," I said, standing up. "Every single time, you were right there, watching, silent, choosing him over me, again and again and again." I walked to the edge of the deck and gripped the railing, looking out at Gregory's perfect yard. Behind me, I could hear her soft sobs, but they sounded like someone else's pain, distant and irrelevant. For 15 years, I had swallowed his insults and her betrayals, telling myself that someday things would be different. Someday I would be successful enough, strong enough, worthy enough to earn their respect. Tonight, I realized I'd been thinking about it all wrong. I didn't need their respect. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them at all. What I needed was for them to understand exactly what they had lost. I called Monica Hale at 7:15 the next morning from my car, parked outside a Starbucks 3 miles from Gregory's house. Monica had been my attorney since the early days of Data Flow Solutions, sharp, ruthless, and completely unimpressed by powerful men who thought they could intimidate her. "Rachel," her voice was crisp even at this hour. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. How did the family celebration go?" "About as well as a public execution," I said, watching steam rise from my coffee cup. "Monica, I need you to do something for me." "I'm listening." I told her everything, every word Gregory had said, every face in that crowd, every moment of my mother's complicit silence. Monica listened without interruption, and I could practically hear her legal mind working through the possibilities. "So you want to destroy him," she said when I finished. "I want to expose him," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there? Because what you're describing sounds like a very expensive, very public form of revenge. He's been lying to everyone about his success for years. Monica, you know it. I know it. And somewhere in his financial records is the proof. I'm not asking you to manufacture evidence. I'm asking you to find the truth." There was a pause. "What exactly do you think we'll find?" "Start with the house. Pull the mortgage records, the refinancing history. Gregory loves to talk about how he paid cash for everything. But I've seen the mail. There are too many bank statements, too many certified letters for a man who owns everything outright. And the business. Sanders Development Group sounds impressive, but I've never seen any major projects. No construction crews, no permit filings, no actual developments. Just a lot of talk about deals that are about to close." "Rachel, even if we find financial irregularities, that doesn't necessarily give us—" "There's more." I took a deep breath. "When I was 18, Gregory had me sign some papers, said it was for insurance purposes, something about making sure I was covered under their policy while I lived in the house. I was naive, trusted him, signed without reading carefully." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. "You think he used your identity for something—" "I think Gregory Sanders is exactly the kind of man who would use his stepdaughter's clean credit to secure loans he couldn't get on his own. And I think when those loans started going bad, he found creative ways to restructure the debt." Jesus, Rachel, if that's true. "Then he's been committing fraud for years, and my mother either knows and doesn't care, or she's been living in willful ignorance while he destroys both their futures." Monica was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her typing. "I'll need 48 hours to pull the preliminary records, credit reports, court filings, property transfers. If there's something there, I'll find it." "Good. And Monica, I need you to set up something else." "What?" "I want to transfer $30 million from the data flow accounts into a new trust structure. Something completely separate from anything Gregory or my mother could ever touch, even if they somehow found out about the money." "That's a significant move. Rachel, are you sure you want to isolate that much capital?" I watched a young mother chase her toddler across the parking lot, both of them laughing. Such a simple thing. Unconditional love. I couldn't remember the last time my mother had looked at me the way this stranger looked at her child. "I'm sure. Make it ironclad. Monica, legal walls so thick that even if Gregory discovered the trust exists, he couldn't touch a penny." "Consider it done? Anything else?" "Start documenting everything, every conversation, every document, every discovery. When this goes public, and it will go public, I want a paper trail that would make the FBI jealous." "Rachel," Monica's voice softened slightly, "I have to ask, what's the end game here? What do you actually want to accomplish?" I closed my eyes and saw Gregory's face from the night before, that satisfied smirk as he humiliated me in front of his friends. I saw my mother's downcast eyes, her refusal to meet my gaze as her husband tore me apart. "I want them to know who I really am," I said finally. "Not the failure they think they see, not the burden they've convinced themselves I am. I want them to understand exactly what they've lost, and I want everyone they know to understand it too. And then I want to walk away, cleanly, completely, permanently. No more family dinners, no more holidays, no more pretending that blood relation and legal documents make us anything more than strangers who happen to share an address. That's a nuclear option. Rachel, you realize once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." I thought about the 15 years of casual cruelty, the 1,000 small cuts that had shaped me into someone harder and colder than I ever intended to be. I thought about my mother choosing Gregory's comfort over my dignity, again and again and again. "There's already no going back," I said. "They made sure of that last night." "All right, then." Monica's voice was all business again. "I'll start pulling records this morning. In the meantime, I need you to do something for me. What? Act normal. Go to their house, have dinner, smile and nod and play the grateful stepdaughter. The more relaxed Gregory feels, the more likely he is to slip up if I need additional information. The thought of sitting at their dinner table, making small talk while Monica dismantled Gregory's life piece by piece, should have made me sick. Instead, I felt something that might have been anticipation. I can do that, I said. I'm sure you can. You've been doing it for 15 years. After I hung up, I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, watching ordinary people live their ordinary lives. A businessman arguing on his phone, a teenager sneaking a cigarette behind the dumpster, an elderly couple sharing a newspaper at one of the outdoor tables. All of them had problems, I was sure. Complicated relationships, financial stress, family drama, but none of them had spent the last decade and a half being systematically destroyed by the people who were supposed to love them. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, heading back to Gregory's house, back to the performance I'd been giving for so long I'd almost forgotten it was an act. But this time would be different. This time, I wasn't the desperate girl hoping for approval. This time, I was a predator studying her prey. Sunday lunch at the Sanders house was a sacred ritual. Every week at 1 o'clock sharp, we gathered around Gregory's mahogany dining table like some twisted Norman Rockwell painting. Today felt different, though I made sure my face showed nothing but the same resigned compliance they'd come to expect. Rachel, sweetheart, you're glowing today, Gregory said as he carved the roast, his knife movements precise and theatrical. Must be all that post-graduation confidence. I smiled and reached for my water glass, my phone already recording in my lap. Thank you, Gregory. I'm feeling really optimistic about the future. That's wonderful to hear, Mom chimed in, passing the potatoes. She'd been trying extra hard to be cheerful since our conversation on the deck, as if forced pleasantness could erase 15 years of complicity. Gregory settled back in his chair, wine glass in hand, ready to hold court. This was his favorite part, the captive audience, the chance to dispense wisdom and judgment in equal measure. You know, Rachel, I've been thinking about our conversation last night, he said, swirling his wine. About your future plans. Oh, I kept my voice neutral, interested but not eager. Well, let's be realistic here. You're 28 years old with a business degree and no real work experience. The job market is brutal right now, especially for someone in your situation. My situation. Come on, honey. You've been in school forever, living at home, no internships, no connections in the business world. Employers want to see initiative, drive, real-world experience. I could feel the familiar heat starting to build in my chest, but I forced my expression to remain open and receptive. What would you suggest? Gregory leaned forward, warming to his subject. I think you need to start small. Maybe a receptionist job somewhere. Get your foot in the door. Build up some work history before you start reaching for anything too ambitious. A receptionist job. I repeated the words carefully, letting them hang in the air. Exactly. There's no shame in honest work, Rachel. And frankly, with your lack of experience, you'd be lucky to get something like that. Most employers aren't going to take a chance on someone who's never had a real job. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. Of course. Now, I know what you're thinking, Gregory continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. You're probably imagining yourself in some corner office, making 6 figures, living in a fancy apartment downtown. But that's not how the real world works, sweetheart. Success takes time, and it takes humility. Humility, I echoed. That's right. You need to accept that you're starting from the bottom and work your way up slowly. No shortcuts, no delusions of grandeur, just honest, hard work, and realistic expectations. He took another sip of wine, clearly pleased with his wisdom. And, of course, there's no rush to move out. I mean, where would you go on a receptionist's salary? It makes financial sense for you to stay here for a few more years. Save up some money. Maybe find a nice young man who can provide some stability. The recording app on my phone was capturing every word, every inflection, every casual dismissal of my worth as a human being. I found myself genuinely curious about how far he would go. "That's very generous of you, Gregory," I said. "But what if I wanted to try something more ambitious? Maybe start my own business?" Gregory actually laughed a sharp, dismissive sound that made my mother flinch. "Oh, Rachel. Sweet, naive Rachel. Do you have any idea what it takes to start a business? The capital requirements, the market analysis, the business plans, the investor meetings. You need connections, experience, credibility. You need people to take you seriously." "And you don't think people would take me seriously?" "Honey, I'm not trying to be cruel here. But let's be honest. You're a pretty girl with a piece of paper from a decent school. That's not nothing, but it's not enough to convince serious investors to hand over their money. Business is about relationships, about trust, about proving yourself over years of hard work." He gestured around the dining room at the expensive furniture and artwork that I now knew he probably couldn't afford. "Look at what I've built. Sanders' development group didn't happen overnight. It took decades of networking, of earning people's respect, of making the right connections." "Tell me about Sanders' development group," I said, my voice bright with fake interest. "I'd love to hear more about your current projects." Gregory's eyes lit up. This was dangerous territory for him, but his ego wouldn't let him pass up the chance to impress. "Well, we're looking at several major developments right now. There's a shopping complex in Westerville that's about to break ground, and a residential project in Dublin that could be huge if the zoning goes through." "That sounds exciting. When do you expect those to close?" "Soon," he said vaguely. "These things take time. You understand. Lots of moving parts, regulatory hurdles, financing complications. But when they hit, they'll hit big." I nodded enthusiastically, making mental notes. Monica would love this part of the recording. "The thing is, Rachel," Gregory continued, settling back into lecture mode, "success in business isn't about luck or education. It's about character. It's about being the kind of person others want to do business with. And frankly, you've got some growing up to do in that department." "What do you mean?" "Well, look at how you've handled your education. Taking forever to finish, accumulating debt, no clear plan for the future. That doesn't inspire confidence in potential employers or business partners. People want to work with winners, not people who need constant support and guidance." The words were designed to hurt, delivered with just enough concern to maintain plausible deniability. But as I sat there recording every poisonous syllable, I felt something unexpected pity. This man had spent 15 years tearing me down because he was terrified that I might surpass him. Every cruel comment, every casual dismissal, every moment of calculated humiliation, it all came from the same place. Gregory Sanders was afraid of being shown up by his stepdaughter, so he'd made it his mission to convince me I was worthless. "You're probably right," I said softly. "I have been pretty naive about how the real world works." "Exactly," Gregory beamed, clearly delighted by my apparent capitulation. "That's the first step, recognizing your limitations. Once you accept where you really stand, you can start making realistic plans." My mother finally spoke up, her voice tentative. "Maybe we could help Rachel with her resume. You know so many people in business. Gregory, maybe you could make some introductions." Of course. I'd be happy to put in a good word for her, assuming she's willing to start at the appropriate level. But Rachel needs to understand that any opportunities she gets will be because of our family connections, not her qualifications. Our family connections. As if I were some charity case he was graciously helping out of the goodness of his heart. "I really appreciate that," I said, and for once, I meant it. Every word out of his mouth was another nail in his own coffin, and he was too arrogant to realize it. The lunch continued for another hour, with Gregory dispensing more wisdom about my failures and limitations. By the time we cleared the table, I had enough recorded material to destroy his credibility with anyone who mattered to him. As I helped Mom load the dishwasher, she whispered, Thank you for being so gracious today. I know Gregory can be a little intense sometimes, but he really does want what's best for you. I looked at her standing there in her designer kitchen, surrounded by things she thought Gregory had provided, completely unaware that her husband was likely mortgaged to his eyeballs and using her stepdaughter's credit to stay afloat. I know, Mom, I said gently. I know exactly what Gregory wants. And for the first time in 15 years, that was absolutely true. Tuesday evening found me at Marcello's, a downtown Italian restaurant where I'd arranged to meet my college friends Sarah and David. They'd been with me through the early days of Data Flow Solutions, back when it was just late-night coding sessions and pizza-fueled brainstorming in Sarah's apartment. If anyone would understand what I was about to do, it would be them. Sarah arrived first, her red hair catching the candlelight as she slid into the booth across from me. "You look different," she said immediately, calmer, somehow. "How was the graduation party?" "Illuminating," I said, pouring wine from the bottle I'd already ordered. Gregory outdid himself this time. David joined us 5 minutes later, loosening his tie as he sat down. "Sorry I'm late. Client meeting ran long?" He studied my face. "Okay, what's going on? You have that look." "What look?" "The same look you had right before you told us you were dropping out of the computer science program to focus on data flow full-time," Sarah said, "like you've made a decision that's going to change everything." I took a sip of wine and set the glass down carefully. "I'm cutting ties with my family." The words hung in the air between us. David's fork paused halfway to his mouth, and Sarah leaned forward, her expression shifting from casual concern to complete attention. "Because of the party?" David asked. "Because of everything. The party was just the final straw." I told them about Gregory's performance, about my mother's silence, about the recording I'd made at lunch. By the time I finished, Sarah was gripping her wine glass so tightly her knuckles were white. "Jesus, Rachel," she breathed. "I knew Gregory was an ass, but this is—" "Systematic abuse," David finished. "That's what this is. 15 years of psychological warfare." "My friends," I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. "Meet the family that thinks I'm a worthless burden who'll never amount to anything." Sarah didn't smile. "Rachel, you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not considering anything. I've already started. Monica's pulling financial records as we speak, and I suspect we're going to find some very interesting irregularities in Gregory's business dealings." "And then what?" David asked. "You expose him, ruin his reputation." "I expose the truth. What people do with that information is up to them." Sarah leaned back in her seat, studying me. "This isn't like you. Rach, you're not vindictive. You're not cruel." "No," I agreed. "I'm not. But I'm also not a doormat anymore." The waiter appeared to take our orders, and we fell into silence until he left. When we were alone again, David leaned forward. "Look, I get that you're angry. I get that they've treated you terribly. But this sounds like scorched earth. Are you sure you're ready for the consequences?" "What consequences?" "The consequence of not having to pretend that people who despise me are actually family. The consequence of not having to smile while Gregory humiliates me for his entertainment. The consequence of not watching my mother choose her husband's comfort over her daughter's dignity for the 1,000th time. The consequence of being alone," Sarah said quietly. The words hit harder than I expected. I set down my wine glass and looked at my hands. "I've been alone for 15 years, I said finally. "I just didn't realize it until now." David reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You have us. You have other friends, people who actually care about you. Don't let Gregory's toxicity make you think you have to burn everything down." "I'm not burning everything down. I'm just pruning, cutting away the diseased branches so the healthy parts can flourish." "That's a very clinical way to describe destroying your family," Sarah observed. "They're not my family." The words came out louder than I intended, and I caught myself glancing around the restaurant. When I spoke again, my voice was carefully controlled. A family doesn't spend 15 years systematically destroying one of its members. A family doesn't stand by and watch while one person gets torn apart for entertainment. A family doesn't treat love like a transaction where affection has to be earned through submission. Sarah and David exchanged glances. It was the same look people always got when the conversation turned to Gregory's treatment of me. That uncomfortable recognition that they were witnessing something wrong but didn't know how to fix it. "Rachel," Sarah said gently, "I know you think this will make you feel better, but revenge—" "This isn't revenge," I interrupted. "Revenge would be making up lies to hurt them. This is just letting the truth speak for itself. If the truth happens to be damaging, well, that's on them for creating it." "Bullshit," David said, his lawyer training showing. "This is absolutely revenge, and you know it. You're going to humiliate Gregory the same way he humiliated you, except you're going to do it with financial documents and legal records instead of cruel words. So ask yourself why you need to do it publicly. If you want to cut ties with them, just cut ties, move out, change your number, live your life. Why do you need to destroy Gregory in front of everyone he knows?" I stared at the candle flickering between us, watching the wax pool and reform. Because for 15 years, he's controlled the narrative. He's the successful businessman, the generous stepfather who took in a struggling single mother and her difficult daughter. Everyone sees what he wants them to see, the perfect suburban patriarch who's been carrying this burden out of the goodness of his heart. "And you want to change that narrative," Sarah said. "I want people to know the truth. I want them to know that the man they respect and admire has been living a lie. I want them to know that while he was busy telling everyone what a failure I am, I was building something extraordinary. And I want them to know that he lost the best thing that ever happened to his family because he was too arrogant and cruel to recognize it." The silence stretched between us. Our food arrived, but none of us touched it immediately. "There's something else," I said finally. "Monica thinks Gregory might have used my identity to secure loans. If that's true, if he's been committing fraud and dragging my credit through his financial disasters, then this isn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This is about protecting myself from the consequences of his actions." David's expression sharpened. "Identity theft?" "Possibly. I signed papers when I was 18 that I didn't fully understand. Gregory said they were for insurance, but you think he was positioning you as a co-signer or guarantor for business loans," David finished. "It would explain a lot. Why he's so confident about his financial situation despite having no visible income stream. Why he's always talked about me like I owe him something beyond normal family obligations." Sarah pushed her pasta around her plate, thinking, "If that's true, then you're not just cutting ties with family. You're extricating yourself from potential financial liability." "Exactly. And if I'm going to have to destroy his reputation to protect my financial future, I might as well make sure everyone understands exactly who they've been defending all these years." David nodded slowly. "Okay, I still think this is dangerous territory, but I understand why you feel like you don't have a choice." "I don't have a choice," I said. "Not anymore. Gregory made sure of that when he decided to humiliate me in front of a room full of people. He escalated this, not me." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my free hand. "Whatever you decide to do, we're with you. But promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that when this is over, you'll let yourself be happy. Don't let Gregory's poison turn you into someone you don't recognize." I looked at my two closest friends, the people who'd stood by me through the building of data flow solutions, who'd celebrated my successes and supported me through my failures. They were right about one thing: I wouldn't be alone. "I promise," I said, and meant it. But first, Gregory Sanders was going to learn exactly what happens when you underestimate Rachel Monroe. The annual Sanders family summer barbecue was scheduled for the last Saturday in July. Gregory had been planning it for weeks, sending out elaborate invitations on cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. "Join us for an afternoon of food, fun, and fellowship," they read, as if we were hosting a church social instead of a backyard party. This year's guest list was particularly impressive, even by Gregory's standards. His business associates, neighbors from the most expensive streets in the subdivision, my mother's colleagues from the hospital, distant relatives who only appeared for major holidays. Nearly 60 people, all carefully selected to witness Gregory's performance as the successful family man. Monica had called me 3 days earlier with her findings. Her voice was tight with controlled anger as she walked me through the documents. "Rachel, it's worse than we thought. Gregory has been using your social security number on loan applications since you turned 18. Credit cards, business loans, even a second mortgage on the house. Your credit report looks like a disaster zone." I had expected it, but hearing the confirmation still felt like a punch to the gut. How much debt? $740,000, and climbing. The credit cards are maxed out. He's 3 months behind on the business loan payments, and the bank is talking foreclosure on the house. Jesus. It gets worse. Sanders' development group exists only on paper. There are no active projects, no construction permits, no employees other than Gregory himself. He's been taking investor money for developments that don't exist and using it to pay personal expenses. So he's not just a thief, he's also running a Ponzi scheme. A very small-scale one. But yes, and Rachel. The foreclosure notice came yesterday. Your mother probably doesn't know yet, but they're going to lose the house within 60 days unless Gregory comes up with $200,000. I sat in my car outside the grocery store, watching ordinary people load groceries into their trunks, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger this time, something sharper and more focused. "Monica, I want you at the barbecue." "Rachel, as my guest, Gregory always tells people to bring friends. I want you there with all the documentation, every loan application, every forged signature, every piece of evidence that proves what he's been doing." "That's not how we plan to handle this." "Plans change. Gregory wants to play the successful businessman in front of his friends. Let's see how successful he feels when they find out he's been committing identity theft and fraud for a decade." Now, standing in Gregory's backyard at 2:30 on a perfect July afternoon, I watched him work the crowd with the same effortless charm that had fooled my mother 15 years ago. He moved from group to group, cocktail in hand, dispensing wisdom and collecting admiration like a politician at a fundraiser. The party was classic Gregory expensive catering disguised as casual family cooking, premium alcohol flowing freely, every detail designed to project wealth and success. Chinese lanterns hung from the trees, a jazz quartet played softly on the deck, and servers in crisp white shirts circulated with appetizers that probably cost more than most people's grocery budget. "Rachel, sweetheart." My Aunt Patricia appeared beside me, resplendent in a floral dress that probably cost more than a car payment. "You look wonderful. How are you feeling about your job search?" "Actually, things are looking up," I said, accepting her air kiss with practiced grace. "I should have some exciting news to share soon." "Oh, how marvelous Gregory mentioned you were starting small, maybe something in reception work." I smiled and took a sip of my wine. "Gregory says a lot of things." Across the yard, I spotted Monica near the rose garden, elegant in a navy dress that probably cost more than Gregory's monthly car payment. She caught my eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. Everything was in place. "Rachel." Gregory's booming voice carried across the patio as he approached our group, his face flushed with wine and self-satisfaction. "Come here, sweetheart. I want you to meet someone." He guided me toward a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver-haired and expensively dressed. "This is Harold Whitman, one of my oldest business associates. Harold, this is my stepdaughter Rachel, the one I told you about." Harold extended his hand with a practiced smile. Yes, the recent graduate. Gregory tells me you're looking for entry-level opportunities." "Something like that," I said, shaking his hand. Well, you've come to the right man for advice." Harold continued. "Gregory built his empire from nothing. Self-made success story, the American dream in action." Built from nothing, I repeated, looking at Gregory. That's fascinating. Tell me more about the empire. Gregory's chest puffed with pride. Well, I don't like to brag, but Sanders Development Group has been responsible for some major projects in the Columbus area. Shopping centers, residential developments, commercial properties. We're looking at a particularly exciting venture in Westerville right now. Could be a $50 million development if the financing comes together. $50 million, Harold whistled appreciatively. That would be quite a coup. The beauty of it is the location, Gregory continued, warming to his favorite subject. Prime real estate, perfect demographics, established infrastructure. The investors are practically lining up. I listened to him weave his fantasies, describing projects that existed only in his imagination, dropping names of investors who probably had no idea he was using them in his stories. With each lie, I felt my resolve crystallize further. Gregory, I said sweetly, you never told me you had such ambitious projects in the works. How do you manage the cash flow for something that large? Well, that's the art of the business. Sweetheart, you leverage existing assets, bring in strategic partners, structure the debt carefully. It's all about timing and relationships. Relationships, I echoed, like family relationships. Something flickered in Gregory's eyes, a momentary wariness that he quickly covered with another expansive smile. Family is everything in business. Rachel, trust, loyalty, shared vision. When people know they can count on you to look out for their interests, they're willing to take risks. Even when those risks involve their personal credit. The group had grown larger during our conversation. More neighbors, more business associates, more witnesses to Gregory's performance. I could see my mother on the far side of the patio, chatting with her hospital colleagues, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. I'm not sure I follow, Harold said, looking confused. Oh, I'm just curious about how family businesses work, I said innocently. For instance, do family members sometimes co-sign loans to help with cash flow issues, share credit applications to increase borrowing capacity? Gregory's face had gone pale, but his smile remained fixed. Rachel, why don't we get you something to eat? You must be hungry. Actually, I'm fine, but I think everyone would be interested to hear more about how Sanders Development Group operates, especially the financing structure. Rachel! Gregory's voice carried a warning now, but it was too late. The audience was engaged, curious about this glimpse behind the curtain of a successful business. Monica appeared at my elbow as if summoned, her briefcase in hand and her smile sharp as a blade. Gregory, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet patio. I'd like you to meet my attorney, Monica Hale. She's been doing some fascinating research into family business practices. The last piece was in place. The trap was set. And Gregory Sanders was about to discover exactly what happened when you built an empire on lies. The patio fell silent except for the soft jazz music still playing from the speakers. Gregory's face had drained of color, but he managed to maintain his practiced smile as he extended his hand to Monica. How lovely to meet you, he said, his voice only slightly strained. Any friend of Rachel's is welcome here. Monica didn't take his hand. Instead, she opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Mr. Sanders, I think we need to have a conversation, in front of all these witnesses. I'm not sure what you mean, Gregory said, but his eyes were darting around the crowd, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice to carry across the patio, I'd like to share something with you. A little family business, you might say. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. My mother appeared at the edge of the circle, her face confused and worried. Rachel, sweetheart, what's going on? Mom, I said gently, did you know that Gregory has been using my social security number to secure business loans? The words dropped like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled guests. My mother's face went white. That's ridiculous, Gregory sputtered. Rachel, you're obviously confused about some paperwork. Am I? I gestured to Monica. who activated her tablet. "Monica, would you mind showing everyone the loan application for the Wells Fargo business line of credit? The one dated 3 years ago." Monica turned the tablet toward the crowd. "This is a loan application for $200,000, signed by Gregory Sanders and co-signed by Rachel Monroe. Notice the signature, it matches other documents Rachel signed at age 18, but she has no memory of this particular loan." "There must be some mistake," Harold said, leaning forward to look at the screen. "Oh, there's no mistake," I said. "Monica, show them the credit card applications." One by one, Monica displayed the documents. Credit cards opened in my name, but sent to Gregory's business address. A second mortgage on the house with my signature forged as a guarantor. Business loans for Sanders Development Group that listed me as a co-owner of a company I'd never heard of. $740,000, I announced to the stunned crowd. "That's how much debt Gregory has accumulated using my identity over the past 10 years. Gregory's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand the complexity of business financing. Rachel, sometimes you have to be creative with structures." "Creative," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling identity theft now?" "This is a family matter," Gregory said desperately, looking around at his guests. "Rachel is obviously having some kind of breakdown, the stress of graduation, job hunting." "Actually," Monica interrupted, "let me clear up any confusion about Rachel's employment situation." She pulled up another document. "This is a copy of the acquisition agreement for Data Flow Solutions, a technology company that was purchased by Technova Corporation 3 months ago for $62.7 million. The silence was complete now. Even the jazz quartet had stopped playing. "The sole owner and founder of Data Flow Solutions," Monica continued, "was Rachel Monroe." I watched the information hit the crowd like a physical blow. Harold's mouth fell open. My Aunt Patricia actually gasped, and Gregory looked like he was going to be sick. "While Gregory was telling everyone what a failure I was," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence. "While he was describing me as a burden who would never amount to anything, I was building a company from nothing and selling it for more money than he'll see in 10 lifetimes. "Rachel," my mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Is this true?" "Every word, Mom, including the part about Gregory stealing my identity to fund his fake business empire." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "For those who missed Gregory's performance at my graduation party, let me refresh your memory." Gregory's voice filled the air, tinny but unmistakably clear. "Not everyone can be a self-made success. Some people need a little more guidance, a little more time to figure things out. That's what family is for, right? Taking care of those who can't quite take care of themselves." The recording continued, playing Gregory's casual cruelty for everyone to hear, his dismissive comments about my intelligence, his patronizing advice about finding a man to take care of me, his complete confidence that I would never amount to anything. When it ended, the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. "Well," Harold said finally, his voice carefully controlled, "this is certainly illuminating." Gregory tried one last desperate play. "Rachel, please. You're upset. I understand that. But airing family business in public like this—" "Family business?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Gregory, you forged my signature on legal documents. You stole my identity to fund your fantasies. You spent 15 years systematically destroying my self-worth for your own entertainment. That's not family business. That's criminal behavior." Monica stepped forward. "Which brings me to the legal ramifications. Mr. Sanders, you have committed multiple federal crimes: identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery. The FBI will be very interested in your business practices." "Now wait just a minute," Gregory said, his voice rising with panic. "I never meant any harm. Rachel is family. I was protecting our interests." "Whose interests?" I demanded, "because it certainly wasn't mine. While you were playing successful businessman with my credit, I was actually becoming successful with my own work. I gestured to Monica, who pulled up one final document. This is a trust agreement, executed yesterday, that places $30 million in an irrevocable trust for my exclusive use. That money, and all my other assets, are completely protected from any claims related to your fraudulent activities. The crowd was beginning to murmur now, whispered conversations breaking out as people processed what they'd witnessed. "The house," my mother said suddenly, her voice hollow. "Rachel, what about the house?" "What about it, Mom?" Gregory said. "He said it was paid for, that we owned it free and clear." I looked at Gregory, whose face had gone from pale to gray. "Monica." "The house is 3 months behind on mortgage payments," Monica said gently. "The foreclosure notice was filed yesterday. Without an immediate payment of $200,000, the bank will seize the property within 60 days. My mother's legs gave out, and Harold caught her arm to steady her. She stared at Gregory with a look of absolute betrayal. "You lied to me," she whispered, "about everything." Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. His empire of lies had finally collapsed, and everyone he'd ever wanted to impress was watching the ruins smolder. I picked up my wine glass from the nearby table and raised it high. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced to the shell-shocked crowd. "To family, the people who stand by you, support you, and believe in your worth no matter what." I looked directly at Gregory as I continued, "and to learning the difference between family and the people who happen to share your address." I drained the glass in one swallow and set it down with a sharp click. "Enjoy the rest of your party," I said. "I won't be staying." I turned and walked toward the house, my heels clicking against the flagstone path with the steady rhythm of a countdown. Behind me, the silence finally broke as voices erupted in shocked whispers and heated questions. I could hear Gregory's panicked explanations starting up, his voice high and desperate as he tried to salvage what remained of his reputation. I didn't look back. Monica fell into step beside me as we reached the sliding glass door. "That was more dramatic than we discussed," she said quietly. "It needed to be dramatic. Gregory has been performing for these people for years. They deserved to see the real show." As we stepped into the house, I could hear my mother's voice behind us, calling my name. But I kept walking, through the kitchen where I'd helped prepare countless family dinners, past the living room where I'd sat through years of Gregory's lectures about my failures, up the stairs to my childhood bedroom, which had become a museum of my supposed inadequacies. I grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed that morning. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, and I wasn't about to let emotion derail my exit. My mother appeared in the doorway just as I zipped the bag closed. Her face was streaked with mascara, her usually perfect composure completely shattered. "Rachel, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We need to talk about this, about all of this." I shouldered the bag and faced her. For a moment, I saw the woman who used to read me bedtime stories, who bandaged my scraped knees and celebrated my small victories. But that woman had been gone for 15 years, replaced by someone who chose silence over solidarity. "What's there to talk about, Mom?" "I didn't know," she whispered, "about the loans, the identity theft. I swear I didn't know." "Maybe you didn't know about the financial crimes," I said, "but you knew about everything else. You knew how he treated me. You knew how he talked to me, about me, in front of other people, and you chose him anyway." "He's my husband." "And I was your daughter." The words came out flat, final. Was being the operative phrase. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Don't say that. You're still my daughter. You'll always be my daughter." "No, Mom. Daughters don't get humiliated at their own graduation parties while their mothers stand by and watch. Daughters don't get their identities stolen to fund their stepfather's fantasies while their mothers remain willfully ignorant. Daughters don't spend 15 years begging for basic respect from people who are supposed to love them unconditionally." "Rachel, please." "I'm done begging." I walked past her toward the stairs. I'm done hoping things will change. I'm done pretending that shared DNA creates obligations that override basic human decency. Monica was waiting by the front door, car keys in hand, through the windows. I could see the party guests still clustered on the patio, their animated conversations visible even from this distance. Gregory was surrounded by a smaller group now. Some had already started to leave. "Why, where will you go?" my mother asked, following me down the stairs. "Away from here. Away from this." I gestured around the house that had never really been my home. Away from people who think love is conditional on silence and submission. "Rachel, I know I made mistakes." "You made choices, Mom. For 15 years, you made the same choice over and over again. You chose Gregory's comfort over my well-being. You chose his version of reality over mine. You chose to be his wife instead of my mother." She was crying harder now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no lingering attachment to the woman who had given birth to me but failed to protect me. "If you walk out that door," she said desperately, "if you cut us off completely, you'll regret it. Someday you'll want family again, and we won't be there." I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at her one last time. "Mom, I've been wanting family my entire life. Real family. People who celebrate my successes instead of diminishing them. People who stand up for me instead of standing aside. People who love me for who I am, not despite who I am." I opened the door and stepped onto the front porch. The summer air was thick with humidity and the sound of distant laughter from the backyard. "The difference is," I said, "I finally stopped looking for it in the wrong place." Monica's car was parked in the circular driveway, sleek and silver in the afternoon sun. As I walked toward it, I could hear Gregory's voice rising behind the house, his explanations becoming more frantic as his audience continued to shrink. "Any regrets?" Monica asked as we reached the car. I thought about the question as I tossed my bag into the back seat. Regrets about exposing Gregory's crimes, about revealing the truth to people who had been living a lie, about walking away from a family that had never truly accepted me. "None," I said, settling into the passenger seat. Monica started the engine, and we pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my mother standing in the doorway, her silhouette small and broken against the expensive facade of Gregory's house. I didn't look back again. As we drove away from that perfectly manicured neighborhood, away from the life I'd never really belonged to, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. Peace, not happiness. Not yet, that would come later. But peace. The quiet satisfaction of finally being free. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dinner at 8. We want to hear everything." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. I have so much to tell you." For the first time in my adult life, I was truly curious about what came next. No more Gregory's expectations to navigate around. No more mother's disappointment to manage. No more pretending to be less than I was to make other people comfortable. Just Rachel Monroe, with $62 million, a brilliant legal team, and a future that belonged entirely to her. Gregory Sanders had spent 15 years trying to convince me I was nothing. It turned out he was wrong about that, too. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Rachel's journey resonated with you sometimes. The most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to accept other people's definitions of our worth. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what you thought about this tale of justice and self-empowerment. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this story, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement means the world to me, and I always love connecting with fellow listeners who appreciate stories about standing up for yourself and reclaiming your power.